The summer is here, and for most of you listening, the warmer weather can bring a ton of new challenges, such as getting your hydration right and trying to deal with workouts that might not be as fast as you're used to in cooler conditions. This makes it the perfect time to cover some strategies you can use to help with summer training in the form of another overrated or underrated episode. If you're new to the show or just need a reminder, this means we'll go over running topics, this week related to summer running, and tell you our thoughts on which are worth your time and which ones might be a little overhyped. The key thing I try to remember at this time of the year, and when training for a fall marathon, is that the goal is to run your fastest on race day, and that it's okay to not be at your fittest now. Coach Michael Hammond has a lot of experience with summer training, so it's only fitting that he join me to weigh in on this summer training edition. He has some pretty bold takes on topics like whether you should use sunglasses, or if electrolyte mixes are overhyped. He even gave some really interesting tips to stay hydrated before a night of drinking, but that might be a little outside of his coaching expertise. These overrated, underrated shows are always a ton of fun, and I know you'll be entertained, so let's get into it. Coach Michael, welcome back to the show, and we have one all about summer training today, so I have to ask you, how are you doing, and how's the weather where you are?
I'm doing great, Cory. I'll tell you what, I live in South Carolina today. This morning when I ran, it was like 71 degrees thereabouts Fahrenheit, which is incredible for summer in South Carolina. It was not very humid. I was loving it. That has not been what it's typically been like as of late. It's definitely been pretty hot, pretty humid. So I'm ready for this conversation, to say the least. This morning I got a little reprieve from it, but I'm ready to have this conversation.
Nice. We have pretty similar temps where I am, just right around 70 though. It kind of hits me like if you had a race and it was 70 degrees, I'd be almost panicking, but this time of year it feels super refreshing.
Of course, it's all contextual, right? Like that first run of like when it gets cooler in the fall, next thing you know, you're throwing on a big jacket, even though it's really not that cold. But then by January, you're good to go because you're used to it. Same thing when it gets into the summer. Like when it starts getting warm, you're like, oh man, it's so hot. But then in the middle of July, yeah, like I said, this morning, low 70s was a huge reprieve from where it's been. So pretty grateful for that, and pretty grateful for our Flagstaff running retreat next week. The temperatures are looking awesome, like highs in the mid 80s, lows in the mid 50s, which is going to be a heck of a lot of fun for everybody coming to our running retreat in Flagstaff next week.
Does your group typically get up early so you can get those temps in the 50s, or do you wait until the sun?
Oh, we get up early, and I'll tell you what, the first time I did it was 2021, and it just was like a very uncharacteristically warm week in Flagstaff that week. And I remember the lows were not too bad. That's the thing, it's up in the mountains, it's up at elevation. Usually it's going to get a little bit cooler, but those days it warmed up so fast. I think it got up to like to mid to upper 90s, and it's a very like dry heat. Yeah, we still get out early. Like the day we go to the Grand Canyon, we're going to leave super early, do a run, and then do a little hike at the Grand Canyon. So it gets warm by the end of that. But when we start, it'll be nice and cool. We'll take advantage of those lower lows.
Oh, Michael, I got to tell you, I'm jealous of you. That sounds great. A few days, nothing but running and going to see the Grand Canyons.
That's the idea. That's the idea, man. The running retreat. Good food, good running, and good people.
All right. Well, after that little side tangent, what do you say we get on today's topic, which is some overrated, underrated evaluation of summer training topics?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. I think a lot of listeners will be familiar, but just a quick recap. We're going to go over some fun running topics today, all about summer running because we're still in July and there's a lot of heat to come. And Michael, you'll give me your thoughts on are they overrated or underrated?
I'm ready. I've always got the strong opinions on things, so I'm ready to go.
All right, let's hear it. We'll start off with our first category, which is all about gear. And I'm going to start off with sunglasses specifically for running.
Flying out the gate with a bit of a controversial one, I'm going to say overrated for sunglasses. And I'll give you my reasoning. There's really only one big reason I'm going to say that. There is some research that indicates that, and bear with me here, when you wear sunglasses, because of the UV protection that sunglasses provide, this is a really fascinating topic to read into. Your eyes perceive the sun and your body reacts accordingly. So for instance, like when you burn, obviously that's your skin, that's a skin response to the sun, but your eyes are actually part of what sort of preps the skin for what it's about to perceive. So there's some research that indicates that actually wearing sunglasses can actually make you burn easier because your body is perceiving it to be less threatening sunlight, thus not like preparing the skin for what you're facing. So I'm not saying don't wear sunglasses. Certainly, like I was just saying, we're going to be running at the Grand Canyon on next Friday in Arizona. Almost certainly, people are going to be wearing sunglasses because you're just facing this beaming sun, and you want the protection for your eyes. Of course, I'm not saying don't protect your eyes. I am saying though that as with many things, there can be potential drawbacks. So I think it's one of those things that's like a slight overrated. I like to take the super hard, controversial opinion just to make it fun, but it's one of those things. Wear them if you need them, but they can be a little bit overrated.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that because we do see a lot of even pro runners racing with sunglasses, let alone training with them. This is not on my list, but curious, how do you feel about hats as an alternative?
Yeah, I would say a hat would be preferred from the sense that I was just talking about, in terms of like your eyes perceiving the sun and preparing your skin accordingly. This is more on a day-to-day thing. I guess when you're racing, I think all that kind of goes out the window, unless you're running like the, one of those brutal Eastern California marathons or the death marches and stuff where you're just literally baking in like 120 degrees and sunlight. That's a different story, but typically racing is just performance and also what makes you feel good. Because you'll see, I mean, for goodness sake, one of the best milers in the world, Josh Kerr, he wore his sunglasses during indoor races this season. Now, I don't think he needed the sun protection indoors. It's just a look thing. It's just a confidence thing. I think it gives him confidence to put on these cool shades and feel like he looks cool, feel like it makes him, a little bit more confident. So I think that from a day-to-day training standpoint, that's obviously a different conversation than something that makes you feel good on race day and makes you feel fast, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So hat's probably better from a day-to-day use case, but hey, if you stick on those shades, those stunner shades, and you feel cool, then go for it.
I think personally, shades definitely get the nod when it comes to running style.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's just a classic look. They look cool.
Definitely. All right, let's go on to our next topic, which is specialized sunscreens. When I say this, I mean oftentimes you pay 2-3 times the amount if you want a sunscreen that's designed specifically for running or other activities. Is it worth that investment?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that right after the sunglasses conversation, because I approach it very similarly. So I think specialty sunscreens are underrated, and the reason why, to answer your last bit of your question, yeah, I think it's often worth it to pay that extra. So we're talking about like mineral sunscreens and sunscreen that is more purposefully suited to running. One of the reasons I think that is because it just lacks the potentially harmful additives that are in more common on the shelf sunscreens. Not that all of those are horribly unhealthy. And of course, the problem is people make it such a binary thing where it's either like lather on a bunch of sunscreen or get the worst sunburn of your life. Like obviously you want to avoid burn. Of course you want to avoid a burn. But what's interesting is that there's here I go again. There's some evidence that suggests that excessive sunscreen use, especially like more mass marketed sunscreen use, can actually make your skin worse because it's just generally unhealthy for your skin. So these companies that are making more like mineral sunscreens, this stuff is just great for you. You're putting it on. The unfortunate thing is that it also can, it doesn't look as good. We actually at our Flagstaff retreat a few years ago, we had this company Tanri, I can't remember how to pronounce it, Tanri, and they sent us a bunch of stuff to give to the people at the retreat. And I took some and put it on. I'm typically the person who I only wear sunscreen if I like really need it. Like I'll gladly be out in the sun for half an hour without sunscreen if it's not beaming. But I put on some of this stuff because we had it for free, and I didn't realize we were out at this park. I didn't realize that I looked like a ghost. I didn't realize that because it's the type that doesn't necessarily blend in as easily. There's chemicals that they put in there to help make it actually blend in so that it doesn't show. But unfortunately, the stuff that doesn't show is typically a little bit healthier for your skin. So of course, don't burn, don't let yourself roast. But I actually think that those nicer sunscreens like Tanri are actually, yeah, I think they're worth the investment. I think it's a little bit underrated.
I like the visual looking like a ghost, and I'm getting the impression this is almost a flip side of what we had with the sunglasses, where you're saying it's worth it from the sun protection, but it maybe loses a little bit of style points.
It most certainly loses some style points. I looked like a bit of a goof. I definitely got made fun of and didn't realize what was going on. And I'm already pretty pale and pasty, so the last thing I need is to just be more pale and pasty, which is what that sunscreen did. But hey, great sun protection.
Yeah, for sure. Take care of your skin. All right, let's go to our next one, which is again, we're talking only in the summer. Arm sleeves, overrated or underrated?
Oh, overrated. I don't even have much to say here. I think arm sleeves are silly. I think if you're a 100-meter sprinter and you're running 9 point something seconds, hey, you wear the whatever arm sleeves you want. If not, lose the arm sleeves. Super overrated. I certainly don't see a benefit other than, again, now we're really just talking style. Yeah, hey, if you can go out there and compete with Noah Lyles in the 100 and 200, you go for it. You wear your arm sleeves. Other than that, toss them. Overrated.
Yeah, and I'll tell you where my head was at coming up with this was thinking back to not this most recent US trials, which just took place, but all the way back to for the Tokyo Olympics. I think Woody Kincaid was in the news a lot because for the 10,000 meters, when the temps were in the 80s or even 90s, he was wearing arm sleeves.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's just a style thing for him. That's just a little like confidence thing. I trained with this guy once that would always wear a shirt. And if you ever go to a practice like from a college team or a post-collegiate group or something like that, and they're doing a hard workout on the track, it's hot in the summer, pretty much guarantee all the men are going to have their shirts off. It's just the way it is. This guy would never, ever, ever take his shirt off. And I swear it was like this little, like, almost mind game type thing of him saying, like, this isn't that hard for me. It's not that hot. I'm all good. I'm not going hard enough to where I need to. Because we were training partners, and yet we were also competitors. That's kind of how post-collegiate, professional track and field is kind of weird like that, in terms of you can train with somebody, and yet when it comes time to the race, you're trying to beat them. But I always took it as a bit of like a mind game thing, that he was like, no, I'm not tired enough. It's not hot enough that I need to take off my shirt. I'm all good. He would never take a shirt. And he would wear like a long sleeve. I mean, it's like dry fit, but he would wear like a long sleeve shirt and not take it off. And meanwhile, we are absolutely baking. So yeah, I just think it's just a style and confidence thing at that point.
That sounds absolutely terrible, wearing a long sleeve in the summer. So personally, I can't endorse that, but power to the guy.
Yeah, again, we're not talking about physiological benefits here. This is all purely psychological, just like Woody Kincaid with those with the arm sleeves in the 10K. Purely psychological.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into one that's more practical. And Michael, this was actually your suggestion to bring up as a topic, but treadmill running.
Extremely underrated. And it's funny talking with like a conversation like this. I live in South Carolina. I was born in Texas. I'm talking to Cory, who lives in Canada. Not that it doesn't get warm in Canada. I understand it gets warm in Canada. It's not like it's Arctic cold all year round. But I'll tell you what, especially when you live in the American South, but really, I've been all over the country. It gets hot everywhere, man. And I think treadmill running is super underrated because people look at it as it's boring. I'm going to tell you, I'm someone who's come around on this. This took me a long time to come around. I used to hate treadmill running, but I think it has a great use case, particularly in longer, half full marathon training and longer in that, but even for shorter stuff too. But the key benefit, I think there's two ways you can use it. One is just a reprieve. So maybe you do an easy run where you're just out there slogging in the heat and humidity all the time. You get on the treadmill, you feel better, you're able to run quicker paces even though your heart rate stays lower. That's obviously a huge benefit. The other use case is for workouts. I think that so often, it's funny at Runners Connect because we have a lot of athletes. We're not just sitting here working with like a small stable. We have a ton of people using our training plans, using our coaching. Every single year that I've worked for Runners Connect, every May, June-ish, all of a sudden we start getting people saying, man, I'm really struggling to hit my paces. My workouts are getting slower. My heart rate's getting higher on runs. What's going on? And what we always, especially now that we've seen it for so many years, what we always wind up saying is just wait till fall. It's all going to change. I mean, this is of course why we also have a temperature adjustment tool where you can put in the temperature, you put in the dew point or the relative humidity, and your paces will actually automatically adjust. We built that because of this exact problem. Treadmill running can be a great reprieve from that. So sort of that's where it sort of becomes kind of that combination of a physiological advantage, but also a psychological advantage. Because anybody listening knows that when you get in the depth of summer, it can be disheartening to have your paces be slower, your effort be higher, just generally feeling crappy because you're out there slogging it. Especially our folks in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Really, really brutal to run in that heat and humidity. And I think the treadmill is just a tremendous alternative, even if it's 1 or 2 days a week, even if that's it, just to get out of the heat and humidity, get in some cooler temps, get some higher quality workouts, or just get a proper easy run where you're not, slogging through that sipping the air through a straw because of the humidity. So super, super underrated. Yeah, love treadmill running nowadays. I've really changed my tune on that. I'm telling you, 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, I would have told you, no, I hate the treadmill, super overrated. But I think actually it's total opposite. Huge 180. I'm a big flip-flopper here. I think that incredibly underrated, great training tool.
Michael, that's a compelling case. And as a skeptic, you almost have me convinced. But hear me out. In the summertime, even if there's air conditioning, somehow nothing feels warmer than when you're running on the treadmill, even with the fan on. Any suggestions for that?
Yeah, you said even with the fan on, because that obviously would be my number one suggestion. It's tough. I think I swear there's just an element of just getting used to it. I'm telling you, I think anyone who is listening that does treadmill running would agree that it's just one of those things that you kind of suffer through a little bit at first, and it takes a while to get used to. And then once you do it more, I especially started doing it because of my kids, and with, like for instance, if I needed to be in the house, if my wife is out or something like that, I needed to be able to run in the house. And I just got used to it to the point where an hour on the treadmill isn't really a big deal. And by the way, there's this meme going around. I'm not going to say, I won't use any explicit language, but there's a meme going around on the internet where people will basically be on flights, and they'll see people on flights that aren't listening to any music. They're not watching movies. They're not reading books. That's what I do on the treadmill. I don't listen to music. I don't watch anything. I just am alone. I typically do that with running, but even on the treadmill, which some people think is just like like blasphemy, like crazy to not even wear headphones or anything when you're on the treadmill. But an hour will go by and it's really not that big of a deal. Maybe on a day where you're feeling particularly crappy, it can be a little bit rough, but I really think it's just something that you kind of have to bite the bullet, and over time you'll get used to it and it'll go by better, and you won't feel so crappy when you're on. I think there is a bit more of a mental element, where you just feel trapped. You're sitting there staring at the clock, you're sitting there, you're just staring it in the face. Whereas out on a run, and especially in nature, you can kind of lose yourself in it a little bit, forget about the amount of time that you've been running, get lost in thought, whatever. Treadmill can be a little bit mind numbing, but I think you just get used to it.
Michael, I'm impressed by your mental fortitude, but I feel like we should be telling viewers they need to be listening to podcasts, not tuning everything out.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Ignore what I said. You got to do as I say, not as I do. Don't listen to what I do. Listen to what I say, which is listen to our podcast. Listen to Run to the Top. Well, on every run, make sure you don't miss it.
There we go. Not so subtle plug.
Yes. Indeed.
All right, I think time for our next topic. So we'll finish off with the gear and move on to racing and training topics. The first one is getting up super early and super late. So essentially, is it worth getting up really early in the morning or staying up when it's not even bright out just for the cooler temps? Or are you better off just sucking it up and running in the heat?
I think it's worth it. I think I'm going to say a little bit underrated to get up early. And I think the thing is, I do want to recognize that we are talking to, people right now that are listening that are almost certainly are on their way to work, or are getting an early morning run before work, or are getting a late evening run when they're exhausted after work. So I say it's underrated, even though I also recognize that most of our audience does it already. I think it's one of those things where, of course there's the sleep element. Of course you got to make sure you're getting enough rest. That's of course important. But I think that anyone who's ever who gets up early, gets a run in damn near before the sun even comes up, can acknowledge that it's a great feeling. It just feels like a huge mental win to get your training in, again, maybe as the sun is coming up, like you're finishing, you're coming back onto your street as the sun is coming up. That's a great feeling, and I think it sets up the day so well. But also, of course, the other added benefit, you get to avoid the more extreme heat, the more extreme humidity. There's sort of like a window. Really, there's a difference between morning and evening. I remember one summer I was living in Texas, and I actually I think I was only running like 30 or 40 minutes a day at the time. It was in the middle of summer. I was kind of on like a sort of a break, like a down month from training. And I remember I would actually do all my runs in the late evening, because in the morning, I wasn't getting up super early, but the morning humidity was so bad. So it was cooler temperature wise, but the humidity was horrific. And so I would go run at like 8 p.m. because it was hot. The temperature was at least 90, if not closer to 100, but the humidity was much lower. So I think there can be a benefit to either one. A good example of like an optimal evening run would be a harder workout. Anything that you're like a tempo run, a threshold session, anything harder where you're really trying to hit some paces and pick things up, that can be more optimal in the morning, because I swear heat is not nearly as bad for workouts as humidity. Humidity will wreck your workout. You should always adjust your paces like we do at Runners Connect, but heat is okay. It's humidity that will totally wreck it. So I'm going to say underrated, just because I think that it's so worthwhile. Like, it's so good and so worthwhile from so many standpoints that I'm a huge convert. I've been waking up at 4:40 a.m. to get training in as of late, just because my son, I try to be up before my son, because letting my wife sleep in a little bit more. I've always enjoyed getting up early. I've always been more of a morning person, but definitely a convert to the super early wake ups. We have this guy with Runners Connect. His name's Cory, that I've met at our retreats before, and he runs at 4 a.m. Like, gets up at like 3:30 and runs at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I've always respected the people like that, and now I've joined their ranks. So not quite 4 a.m., but very early. It's worth it. It's great. It sets up your day really well. So underrated.
That is impressive. I'm usually up at like 5 and 6 for runs, but 3:30 somehow, even though it's not minute wise that much before, it just feels like a whole other world getting up at that time.
There's something so different about it, man. When there's a 5 in front of it, you're like, that's just a normal morning. But when there's a 4, or God forbid a 3, like if you have to wake up early for a flight, like I'll probably have to do on Wednesday before Flagstaff, then there's just something different about that. And that's where the other side of this coin, the other side of this discussion is, you got to make sure you get enough sleep. Of course, you have to, but you also have to do what you have to do as an adult, and with responsibilities, and often getting up early and getting the run in is just what you have to do. So life is a challenge. Life is a balance, right? But I think it's typically worth it to get on up early and get it done.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. The feeling of getting it done early is fantastic.
It's awesome. I love it.
Okay, next topic we're going to get into is splitting up your long run. And this can apply any time of year, but I think a lot more people ask about it in the summer just because it can be so tough to get in those really long, slow, easy runs when it's, 80s, 90s, or even over 100 out.
I'm going to say a little bit underrated. I do think that there is value in splitting up your runs. I think this is another one of those things that's not binary. It's not either you get the full 14-mile long run or you get nothing. There's a gray area here. Getting 2 7-mile runs or an 8-mile and a 6-mile, whatever, instead of doing that 14-mile long run is still really good. Is it as physiologically optimal as getting in that total 14-miler? It's not. It's just not. There's a huge value in red blood cell development, capillaries, recruiting those fast twitch muscle fibers. There's all sorts of benefits to running over roughly 90 minutes at a time. But when you're talking about in the heat of summer, dealing with humidity and stuff where it's just so brutal on your body to get those long runs in, yeah, I think there can definitely be value. What I would suggest to everybody is make sure that you're fueling and hydrating properly before you resort to breaking up your long runs. And I mean really hydrating, not just right before the run, all the time, 24/7. Make sure that you're hydrating. I personally find in the heat of summer that I can drink as much water as I want, I can eat as healthy as I want, and even then I have to start supplementing some electrolytes. I have to, because I'm not a heavy sweater at all, like total opposite of a heavy sweater, and yet I still find that even if I'm just crushing the water, eating great, making sure to add plenty of salt to my food, etc., that I still need to supplement electrolytes. So I would suggest, even though I think it's a little bit underrated to split up long runs, I would nonetheless suggest that people do everything they can to make sure that they're fueling properly, make sure that they're fully fueled electrolyte wise, eating plenty of salt throughout the day, taking some electrolyte supplements, however you choose to do that. Make sure that you do that to make sure that it's actually not a fueling issue. If you're doing all that right and you're still bonking and just feeling like crap after those long runs, heck yeah, split them up. No big deal. Underrated.
Yeah, the salt thing comes into play so much for those long runs. I find one of our sponsors, LMNT, they really lean into the whole salt thing. And I find if you take it when you're not running, it has a strong taste, but drink that stuff after a long run in the heat and it just goes down so easy. It's like your body knows what it needs.
Yeah, that stuff is super, super salty. Yeah, they send us samples for our retreats. I actually last year at Flagstaff tried it. I hadn't tried it before. I tried it for the first time and I was like, whoa, that is mega salty. And you're right, it tastes delicious, goes down easy. I didn't care for the chocolate flavor, I must admit. Sorry, LMNT, if I'm bashing you. I love the lemon lime and a couple of the other flavors, but couldn't quite get into the chocolate personally. But yeah, I mean, anything like that works. I mean, heck, you can go buy, if you're in a pinch, go to the store and buy some Gatorade and dilute it with water. You don't need to drink full Gatorade. For most people, it's just a little bit too sugary, a little bit too syrupy. Dilute it, 50-50 water Gatorade mix. There you go. In a pinch, Gatorade's available everywhere. So salt tablets are another way to do that as well. But make sure you're getting those electrolytes in and see if that helps with the long run issue. And fuel as well, nutrition wise. You need to have, we can talk about this, I know you have electrolytes and stuff on the list, but you need to have the fuel in terms of like glycogen, glucose, that's also going to help with those electrolytes. So you can't just take electrolytes and expect that to do all the work for you. You got to be well fueled holistically all around in order for those electrolytes to go where they need to go. But try that first. But yeah, absolutely, if you need to split up the runs, totally worth it to make sure get the miles in without just totally destroying your body. So underrated.
And we will get to the electrolyte piece, but just one more question on the long runs. Would you recommend that runners plan to break it up in advance, or is that more of a last resort if you find that you're getting overheated well out on the run?
That's a really good question. I would say to have everything planned out, like don't leave it as a last resort thing, because I think the issue there becomes you get into some weird psychological stuff of, let's be honest, long runs are just kind of hard. Like long runs are not a particularly easy, I mean, for some people it's no big deal. They just go out and run 2 hours, no big deal. But for most people, for us mere mortals, long runs are just a challenging mental thing to get in. So I don't necessarily want people going into long runs with that thought in their mind of, I can break this up. It's an option, because your body's going to be sitting there telling you, yeah, break it up, stop running, right? We don't want to just give it that out right away. I think the better solution is to do what we just said, work on your fueling, make sure that you're fueling properly, then see how those longer long runs go without trying to break them up. If you're still either bonking or you're just feeling like total garbage the rest of the day and into the next week's training, that's not worth it. Then from there, I would plan to start splitting them up, but only once you've exhausted all your options and make sure that you're taking care of business with fueling and stuff. Then only then would I actually recommend planning to split them up.
Yeah, I like that approach. And I think that's another benefit of the morning run is it does give you that wiggle room if you need to slip in some extra miles or another training run later in the day.
Indeed, yeah. If you start at 8 p.m., you might have a rough time. Might have a rough time splitting them up.
Yeah, definitely. All right. The next one I want to ask about is dumping water on your head. Is it worthwhile and is it going to cool you off or is it really for show?
Oh, it's definitely worthwhile. Underrated. I think that putting water on your neck can also help. But I mean, just in general, it's gonna get your hair cooler. Your hair. I'm a person. I have extremely thick hair. I'm not saying that as like a brag or anything like that. I'm saying it actually can become a problem because I used to have really long hair and it gets really hot. Like 2 summers ago, I think I had some of the longest hair I've had as an adult, like out of high school. Yeah. Oh my God, it got so hot. So yeah, dumping water is gonna help a ton just to kind of get some cool, get something cool in there. But also dumping it on your neck specifically. I'm a layman when it comes to this, but I do know that there's research that supports that will actually lower your body temperature. When it specifically hits your neck, that cold water. So yeah, I think that that's underrated. It's not going to sit there and save you if you haven't hydrated well and if you're running in 110 degrees and high humidity. Definitely worthwhile to do in a race if you have access. If you can get a cup of cold water or something, and you're already hydrating. Maybe you have your own water and electrolytes that you're using. Definitely worth it to stop and throw it on the back of your head and on the back of your neck specifically. So underrated.
Michael, I like the advice, but I don't think you're going to get a lot of sympathy for your thick hair.
I know, man. It's funny, especially as I've gotten into my 30s. It's definitely something that I'm sitting here. Oh no, my thick hair. Like, of course, it's awesome, but I always just have to reiterate, it does come with some drawbacks. It can be very difficult to it's very zany. It's very difficult to handle, but I just kind of let it do its thing now. So yeah, thankfully my kids seems to have gotten the same thing. My son has my extremely thick hair, so he'll deal with the same when he has this big mop of hair out trying to run in the summer heat. So
we've talked about hats already, but do you find with the thicker hair or a fuller head of hair that the hat helps, or do you prefer to go without one?
I almost never run with a hat. Personally, I don't even have a good explanation for that. It's not necessarily something I've thought through. The only time I think I've ever run with a hat is when it's raining. That's the only time I've ever run with a hat, is if it's really a downpour, and yeah, that's where a hat comes in handy. But I just don't I don't know. I generally don't wear hats day to day. It's just not something I find very comfortable. So I don't think I would enjoy it. And when I do it, if it's rainy like that, I don't really like it. I'm only doing it just to so I can see when it's raining like that. But yeah, hats not my thing, but definitely have value for people for sure.
Yeah. I as somebody who's very, very fair skinned, I definitely lean on the hat just for that extra little bit of shade, whatever I can get.
No doubt. I'm right there with you, man. I need it. Like I said, in Flagstaff next week, I will definitely need all the help I can get.
Yeah, pack a couple extra hats with you.
But thankfully, I'm there with our other coach. His name is Rory Moynihan, and his first name is spelled Ruairi. If that's not an Irish spelling of a name, I don't know what is. And Rory is even more fair-skinned and probably easily burnable than me, so I won't look too silly throwing on my Ghost sunscreen when we're in Phoenix.
Love it. I can't wait to see all the photos from the retreat.
Oh yeah, we're excited.
Okay. Our last topic in racing and training is going to be extending rest versus slowing your paces, and all of these come when the conditions are tough and you maybe need to modify a workout in order to get through it. So which would you prefer if you have to take one?
Yeah, I would almost always slow the paces first. I think that's just going to be your best bet, because ultimately it does depend on the workout. If you're about to run a 5K, and you're absolutely trying to target a certain pace for that race, and this is like a big pre-race workout a couple weeks out, you really want to hit those splits. That's a different case where I think I would probably say just extend the rest, because it is so pace specific. But for the majority of your workouts, especially in any endurance training, any marathon training, anything like that, the effort is really what's more important anyway. The effort, your lactate levels and stuff like that, that's what's actually more important. So I would always recommend adjusting the pace first and then seeing if you also need to adjust the recovery. You might need to do both. If it's really hot and humid, it's a brutal day, you might even need to do both. But I always tell people, just default right away, adjust at least 10 seconds a mile, if not even 20. And I know for some people that's they can't even fathom adjusting like that, because they feel like they're not going to get a good workout. You are going to get a good workout. In fact, you're going to get every bit as good of a workout as if you ran the faster paces, probably a lot better, because you're keeping the effort in check. I've done threshold sessions where it's hot and humid, and I'm running 10 seconds per mile slower than I normally do, and yet I'm running essentially all out. At that point, it's not a threshold session anymore. I've ruined the workout. I've done that several times before. So I think adjust the paces first. That should be your first go-to, again, unless it's that super race specific, pace prep type workout. Otherwise, adjust the paces first and then adjust the rest if you need to.
Yeah, if it is that super specific race pace, is there any sense in maybe taking a completely different approach and just cutting down reps?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably, but I think that if let's say you're doing, I mentioned that prepping for a 5K. So let's say someone's doing 400 or maybe even like 800 meter reps at roughly not roughly, like exactly their goal 5K pace. Let's say you're really trying to hammer down a pace and you were taking 3 minutes rest. Let's just up it to 4. Let's just up it to 4 right away and do half of that just walking very slowly and then half a slow jog, and give yourself time to get some water, get some electrolytes in you between reps, and see how that does for you. But yeah, I think at some point, no matter what type of workout you're doing, there will come a time where you just have to cut it short and maybe even bail on it. Because I keep mentioning the threshold workout example. That's a great example where that's an easy workout to overdo anytime. It's even easier, infinitely easier to overdo that when it's hot and humid. So always err on the side of caution, I would say. When it's hot and humid, the effort can get out of control really fast. Really, really quickly. It can go from an under control workout to a totally out of control workout. And I swear everybody will probably confirm this based on their own experience. It's so much harder to get a workout back under control, to get a run back under control when it's hot and humid. When it's cool out, if it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit and you're on a tempo run and you're pushing a little bit too hard, your heart rate's getting a little bit too high, you can be like, all right, I'm gonna back off, take it easy for a minute here, let my heart rate get back under control and finish up the workout. You do that when it's hot and humid, it's gone most of the time. Like if you're crazy fit and adapted to running in that heat and humidity, you'll probably be okay. But for most of us, the workout's gone by that point. So I generally recommend a conservative approach to workouts no matter what, any time of the year, anytime during your training. But I think it's doubly so when it's hot and humid. Just err on the side of caution, even if it seems slow to you. The later parts of the workout will thank you for having been so conservative early on. So just take that conservative approach, but slow the paces first, then extend the rest. And if all else fails and the workout's gone, let it go. Don't chase it. Don't chase the rest of the workout and let it become something out of control. Let it become essentially a race effort. Don't do that. If it's gone, bag it. It's okay. It's just one day.
Yeah. I think fantastic advice. All right, we'll come to our last topic, which is nutrition, hydration. And Michael, you already alluded that we were going to touch on this topic, but let's get to it. Electrolyte tablets. Are they underrated or overrated?
Oh, this is a tough one for me because are electrolytes overrated? No, but as a general concept, of course not. But a lot of the electrolyte products that are on the market, I think are a little bit overrated. And I'll tell you why. I am not a huge fan of the move, and this is just because what the market demands, so the businesses are going to supply it. I'm not a huge fan of the big move towards zero sugar with electrolytes. I'm not saying they need to be loaded with sugar. Like I said, if you go get a Gatorade, dilute it with water. It's way too sweet and syrupy and sugary on its own. But sugar, glucose, helps. I mean, look up the research on this. It's very clear cut that it helps to get those electrolytes where they need to go. If you have, let's say you have you're in a state of glucose exhaustion, like you haven't had any carbs, any glucose in 24 hours or something like that, your body will start to shuttle out those electrolytes. It's essentially like it's going into like a starving. And this gets into a big nutrition topic, but I think it's still important nonetheless. The brands, the electrolyte brands that do have a little bit of sugar, it's not just there to make it taste good. I know sugar tastes good, it tastes great, but it's not just there to make it taste good. It's also there to help shuttle those electrolytes where they need to go. An alternative, of course, is just, eating healthy in general, eating healthy carb sources as a general part of your diet, and then taking those zero sugar electrolytes. But in general, that's why I'm going to say that they're a little bit overrated, I think, because of that because of that, and also because of the fact that electrolytes are in your food. I like to tell people that, I think the supplement industry, and again, I'm a huge fan of supplements. I think they're awesome. I think electrolyte supplements are fantastic. But I do think the supplement industry has almost successfully convinced people that electrolytes that are like this foreign thing that you have to get from expensive, powders and stuff. It's just sodium, which is in salt. Obviously, that's our source of sodium. It's potassium. Eat a banana. There you go. There's your potassium. It's calcium, which you get from all sorts of different sources, right? So it's much more simple, I think, than those supplement companies make it out to be. So if you're eating healthy, salting your food, and I would tell any runner, salt the heck out of your food. I get it. Some people have hypertension and health issues beyond a discussion like this. But for most people that are marathon training, yeah, salt the heck out of your food. It tastes great for a reason, because your tongue is craving it. Your body's craving it. So, but anyway, I do think that they're a little bit overrated just because of the push towards zero sugar, especially when they start using alternatives that we just don't know a lot about. It's not that they're by default bad necessarily, but a lot of those are relatively new in the scope of human nutrition. So we just don't really know what's going on with them. We don't know whether they're good for us or not. So I think that they're a little bit overrated. I would recommend using one that has a little bit of sugar, or you could even add a little bit if you want. And I know there's such a huge movement against sugar, and I'm not necessarily saying sugar is a good thing for you. I'm just saying that the research is extraordinarily clear that sugar, glucose, helps those electrolytes get where they need to go, helps your body keep those electrolytes instead of, if you ever go on a carb like crash diet, you'll find that you lose all this weight because it's water weight. You're losing all this water weight because your body's not retaining any of that water. It's not going to retain any of those electrolytes. A lot of people who go super low carb will get cramps. Will get like I've gotten like Charlie horses before. Anybody who's gotten those, they're brutal. It's because your body cannot hang on to the water and the electrolytes. The pumps are just all messed up. So anyway, I think a little bit overrated, but electrolytes as a concept, not overrated at all. It's super, super, super important. And as I said, I find even when I'm eating perfectly healthy, salting the heck out of my food, eating right, I don't know, doing everything right, even then in the middle of summer, I gotta supplement electrolytes. It's just gotta happen. I'm not a heavy sweater. So electrolytes are great. Electrolyte supplements, tad bit overrated.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I love the marketing around a lot of these things. I think a lot of people want to avoid sugar and salt, but you take Gatorade and call it electrolytes and fuel, and suddenly everyone wants to grab it at their first opportunity.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to protein, and I think protein is great. You got to have your protein. I'm not saying that it's not important, and yeah, I think it's a healthy part of even a runner's diet is having healthy protein. But whey protein, it's come to the point where like you'll do this. It'll be like 2 serving size, 2 mega scoops or whatever, and it'll be like 50 grams of protein. I'm not saying that protein's bad for you. Protein's amazing for you. You got to have it. But it's like they've successfully convinced people that you need this obscene amount of protein, this crazy, insane amount of protein. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. This doesn't affect the running world quite as much, but definitely something you see more in the broader fitness space is like these obscene amounts of protein. I think that's because of the supplement industry, because whey protein powder is cheap, lightweight, easily shippable, and thus it's very popular for them to make it. And it'll just be these absurd amounts of protein. So I think it's very similar with electrolytes in that a lot of it is marketing, and yet there is a lot of this based in truth as well. So by no means am I saying that electrolytes are bad, or even that the zero sugar ones are bad by default. They're not bad by default. I just think that it's important for people to know that the glucose is an important part of that chain, of that process with electrolytes, of actually retaining that and having them go where they need to go to your muscles. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels between the protein and the electrolytes. I was going to ask for your opinion. When I first started working with my coach, or the first summer after I started working with her, I started looking around for electrolyte drinks because it's not something that I had used much in the past. And I found the majority of them had no calories, no sugar was their marketing. And I went to her and I asked, and I said, what is the purpose or the target market here for people who need this obscene amount of salt but don't want any carbs or sugar? And her response was that she said was the only thing she could think of was hot yoga. Is that accurate?
Interesting. Was she? Do you think she was saying that just because they just like are in there sweating an obscene amount? Was that the idea?
I think trying to think of somebody who would sweat an obscene amount without actually putting in much movement to burn calories, because I think as runners, we probably, if you're sweating enough to need electrolytes, you're going to need those carbs too.
Dude, all I'm gonna say, I did yoga for the first time actually at one of our retreats. I got wrecked by the yoga teacher. Oh my goodness, I did it with the people that were at the retreat. It was so hard. I'm not a particularly flexible person. I had such a tough time. So I don't know that I can get behind that, because yoga can be a huge challenge, man. It can be really hard. But I see the point in terms of like, you're not actually like, I mean, I think yoga, you definitely do burn those calories, but I see the point that would be the use case. Someone who's not necessarily burning the calories, but needs the electrolytes. I do think it's important to look at this stuff as in the grand scheme of things, in the scope of a full diet. And that's why I was saying, the zero sugar electrolytes, there's nothing wrong with them in the scope of a healthy diet. If you're eating good carb sources throughout the day, and getting plenty of that glucose in, then yeah, you don't necessarily need it directly with the supplement, which is why really that's my general attitude towards supplements. I love them, but I love them as supplements on top of an already healthy diet. They're going to work better in that case. That's how they really are meant to work. They're not necessarily meant to be a direct replacement of. And if you take electrolyte supplements, but you never eat any salt, like you never actually salt your food, that's not good. Like I think you need to be getting that salt, ideally more salt with full mineral profile. I think that's important as well. There's probably not a good use case for that directly if you look at it kind of in vitro, sort of by itself, it just taking an electrolyte supplement with no calories. But on top of a healthy diet, I could see where the zero sugar one could be a good alternative, especially for anybody who's diabetic or pre-diabetic. I could see where it has a good use case if they feel like they're maxing out on carbs. Maybe their doctor has them on like under 100 grams a day or under however many grams a day, and they don't want to add any carbs from electrolytes, but they want to take electrolytes. That's where I could see being a good use case for the zero sugar one. So by no means am I tossing them out, throwing them out the window. It's just I want people to understand the role of glucose, that it does have an important role to play in electrolytes and electrolyte metabolism.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. All right, moving on to the next one. It's going to be prehydrating, overrated or underrated. And when I say prehydrating, I'm not talking about your regular, drinking water throughout the day. I'm talking about, can you take in a lot of electrolytes and fluids the day before and then hope that you can get away with a little bit less the next day or later in the day?
Ooh, that's a good one. And it's funny, when I first read it, I'm gonna get some flack for this. When I first read it, I thought back to like my college days, where before going out to like the bars or going to a party, you would pregame, which usually means like alcoholic consumption. But it's funny because I still do this to this day. If I know I'm gonna have like on July 4th, you have a few beers, I'm gonna make sure to prehydrate for the event with electrolytes and stuff. I'm not dealing with hangovers in my 30s, man. It's not happening. So anyway, back to the topic at hand. I think that that's super overrated, because I think that it's probably almost certainly foolish and will probably lead to people doing really, really silly things. I mean, taking in a ton of water, believe it or not, I think most people know this, can actually be dangerous. I mean, it can actually be harmful to your body, which is why the electrolyte conversation is so important. To give people an idea, it's funny how, usually the target in terms of your urine is to have it be clear. You actually want it to be a little bit less than clear. If it's super, super crystal clear, typically that means you need a little bit extra salt. If it's super yellow, or God forbid worse, you need to hydrate. You need water ASAP. Like right now, right away, you need water. So really, you actually want a little bit of color to your urine on a day-to-day basis. You don't necessarily want to be peeing all the time and have it all be super, super clear. So the point there being that it's actually possible to overhydrate. And I just don't think that there's any way that anyone's going to be able to do that, even if it potentially has benefit. I think it would have to be under such a controlled environment that I don't think that that's even remotely worth it. To chase down, I would just hydrate normally as possible. Kind of similar to how I approach eating. I even am not a huge proponent of like crazy going insane with carbo loading before races, because I think it's just so easy to have it get out of control. It's a difficult thing without working with a professional to really get right. So I think just have proper hydration become a habit for you, and don't worry about playing the games of of excessive hydrating so that you have to drink less on race day. I would just hydrate totally normally going into a race or a workout.
Does the same apply to when you're going out to drink? Do you need to drink normally, or would you still pregame with some water?
Ooh, that's good, man. Yeah, of course you want to. Yeah, you got to pregame. Like I said, especially when I was 21 years old, I could probably get away with whatever I wanted. But I'm 34 now. You can't do that. So yeah, definitely got to pregame. That's where electrolytes. It's really funny to me that a lot of the electrolyte companies don't lean into that more. I've always found that really interesting. That there's not one of those brands that just said, you know what, we're gonna get away from like the fitness angle. We're just gonna go totally into hangover prevention and like keeping you hydrated, whatever, as it pertains to alcohol. So I've always found that really funny. That I remember talking to a rep from one of the. I would say they're not the big player now, but 10 years ago they were the biggest name in electrolytes. And I remember him saying that they knew full well that was a big use case for the people that use their product was essentially hangover prevention, because alcohol super quickly can deplete your electrolytes, your water as well. But electrolytes are so important. That's what you can pound a bunch of water, but if you're not getting the electrolytes, that's not good either. So that's the best thing you can do actually to prevent a hangover, is to have adequate, match each alcoholic drink with 8 to 12 ounces of water with some electrolytes in it. You'll feel great, no problem. Don't quote me on that, because someone's going to go absolutely insane with it and end up in the hospital or something like that. But in theory, if you do that accurately and you pre-hydrate, then yeah, you're going to do pretty well. So do it before you drink alcohol, pre-hydrate, but don't do it before runs and races.
We're not medical professionals on this show, that's for sure, but I do think the information that we're giving is practical, whether it's running or pre-gaming, as it turns out.
We are most certainly not medical professionals. I'm sure I would get scoffed at for a lot of the things that I've said so far, and especially the pre-drinking one comes totally from personal experience. So take it with a grain of salt, if I may. Take it with a grain of electrolyte. There you go.
For our next topic, we actually kind of touched on this quickly, so I don't want to harp on it too long, but calorie-free sports drinks, any more thoughts on those?
Oh man, super overrated. And for the effectively the same reason, is that you're just getting the electrolytes. But really, I would say on this topic, like in terms of a sports drink, if we're talking about more of an energy thing, keeping you energized throughout a run or a workout, yeah, I think it's extremely overrated to have it be calorie-free. Now, I'll balance that out by saying that I'm not a big proponent of fueling with any sort of like calories unless a run is minimum over an hour. My rule typically for athletes, and this is just default and then we adjust based on the person, anything under an hour, I think you should be fueling adequately on a day-to-day basis, in terms of your meals. That's not necessary. 60 to 90 minutes is subjective, kind of depends on the type of workout. Maybe there are instances where it is necessary, or depending on the person. And then 90 minutes plus, a lot of the time, yeah, some fuel taken in, and unless you're working on glycogen depletion as part of your strategy to fat adaptation for the marathon, anything like that. But that's kind of a more niche topic. Yeah, I think the calorie-free sports drinks on the whole, overrated for sure. I just don't see the good use case for runners. I think that the no calorie electrolyte mixes can be a little bit different. But in terms of the calorie-free sports drinks, I don't see the benefit for runners, so definitely overrated.
Yeah, I get that. All right, I think that brings us to our last topic. And before I get into it, I need to give a little bit of background for anyone listening and for yourself to truly appreciate it. But in another overrated, underrated episode, when we had Rory on, and this was related to marathon topics, I think it was perhaps one of the most controversial answers that I talked about the post-marathon beer, and his answer was that it's overrated. So Michael, in the context of summer running, what is your response on a post-run beer? Is it overrated or underrated?
I'm gonna have to talk to Rory about that next week in Flagstaff, that he said that was overrated. I'm flabbergasted that he said that it was overrated, because he just seems like, I know he loves running, and I know he loves beer. I can't believe he doesn't love the combo of both. It's like a food item where you like one ingredient, you like the other ingredient, but combining them, no thanks. I'm gonna say super underrated, man. I think a post-run beer on a warm like afternoon summer or like evening summer run, this is why like pub runs are so popular, followed by a cold beer. Personally for me, I think there's about nothing better. It just feels so good. It's one of those things, I don't want to sit here and claim that it's like this physiologically super healthy thing. I think there's an argument for glycogen replenishment and stuff like that, but ultimately I'm not going to sit here and try to argue that alcohol is good for you. However, I think it's super fun. I think it brings people together. I think it's extremely underrated, and I'm gonna harass Rory about that in Flagstaff for sure, because I can't believe that he said that.
As you should. I can't think of anything better than a post-marathon fuel than a cold glass of beer.
Watch, he's gonna say that he's actually playing a long joke, and he's gonna be like, "No, that's overrated because you should be having 2 beers after a marathon." That's what he's gonna say. That's what he meant was only one. Oh, that's super overrated. Why would you only do that? But no, I really can't believe he said that. I'm curious to hear his reasoning for that.
Yeah, I hope that was his answer. We'll have to bring it back on the show if you do get a response from him as a follow-up.
Yeah, of course. Oh, I will. I'll definitely see what he says, and if it's interesting, we'll revisit.
All right, tune into the next Overrated Underrated for a full recap of what we think of beer. But Michael, I think that's a good place to end off. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me again.
You bet, Cory. It was a good time.